Leonardo da Vinci spent 12 years working on this painting. 12 years on a portrait he was supposed to deliver in a few months. He carried it with him across Italy. He took it to France when he was old and sick and running out of time. He kept touching it, adjusting it, refusing to let it go. He died before he considered it finished. Nobody knows exactly why he couldn't put it down, but if you look closely enough, if you understand what he actually built into this canvas, you start to get a sense of it. Because the Mona Lisa isn't just a painting, it's an experiment. One of the most sophisticated visual tricks ever constructed by a human mind, and it works on you whether you know it or not. 10 million people a year stand in front of this painting. Most of them leave without understanding what they just saw. And that's exactly where we start. Florence is thriving. It's 1503. The streets overflow with wealth, merchants, bankers, artists. The Medici family controls nearly everything from the shadows, and art has become a status symbol. In the middle of all this, Leonardo da Vinci accepts a commission from Francesco del Giocondo, a well-off cloth merchant who wants a portrait of his wife, Lisa Gherardini. She's 24 years old. It seems like just another family portrait to hang on the wall. But Leonardo doesn't treat it like a normal job. He's not just a painter. He's an engineer, a scientist, a sculptor, and an architect. He designed armored vehicles, flying machines, and something that looked remarkably like a self-driving car. And he doesn't paint like anyone else. In the Mona Lisa, he uses a technique called sfumato, layering dozens of ultra-thin coats of diluted oil paint. The result is extraordinary. Hard edges disappear, shadows blend. The skin looks like it's breathing. Some people see her as happy, others as sad. The painting seems to shift depending on the mood of whoever is looking. That's not an accident. Leonardo spent nights in a Florence hospital dissecting human bodies to understand how muscles and nerves work together to produce a smile. He also studied optics and discovered that the center of the retina picks up sharp detail, while the surrounding area catches softer shadows. Look closely at her lips. The line is almost flat. When you stare directly at her mouth, she doesn't look like she's smiling at all, but thanks to the sfumato shadows, your peripheral vision reads them as a smile. For Florence in 1503, that's a revolution. Nobody has seen a portrait that looks alive, that shifts, that plays with whoever is looking at it. But if Leonardo was Italian and Lisa was Italian, why is the painting in France today? In 1516, Leonardo leaves Italy at nearly 64 years old. King Francis I of France invites him to court, installs him in the Château de Clos-Lucé, and gives him a generous salary, servants, and total creative freedom. In his bags, Leonardo brings a few manuscripts, some sketches, and the portrait of Lisa. The king is immediately captivated. Leonardo hangs it in his study and keeps working on it. He can't let it go. It becomes his last great work, the last painting he labors over with patience, the last one that stays with him until the end. In 1519, Leonardo dies, and Francis I buys the painting for 4,000 gold écus, the equivalent of roughly $50 million today. From that moment, the Mona Lisa belongs to France. But while the painting begins its life as a royal treasure, a bigger question surfaces. Who is really hiding behind that portrait? Lisa Gherardini was born in 1479 in Florence. She married Francesco del Giocondo young and had at least 2 children by the time the portrait began. In Italian, Mona meant my lady, so the title simply means Lady Lisa. She also became known as La Gioconda, a blend of her married name and the Italian word for joyful. For centuries, nobody could prove the sitter was actually Lisa. Then, in 2005, a note surfaces at the University of Heidelberg in Germany, written in 1503 by a Florentine official who personally confirms that Leonardo was working on a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. A name, a date, a context. Case closed, it seemed. Except it wasn't. At this point in his life, Leonardo was buried in ambitious military projects. He had no time for portraits, even when important people begged him. So why drop everything for the wife of a cloth merchant? Some researchers believe the model isn't Lisa at all, that it's actually a hidden self-portrait, Leonardo painting himself as a woman. Studies of the facial features reveal a blending of masculine and feminine traits that's hard to dismiss. Others point to noble ladies or rumored lovers. Some even suggest the figure could be Salai, Leonardo's closest apprentice, dressed as a woman. Nobody agrees. And that ambiguity is part of what makes it impossible to look away. Because beyond who she is, there's another question. What is she feeling? No matter how many times you look at the Mona Lisa, you can't land on a single emotion. Sometimes she looks like she's smiling. Sometimes she doesn't. British researcher Margaret Livingstone explained that the face is deliberately asymmetrical. The left side and the right side express different things. And that asymmetry is exactly why no one can agree on what her expression means. Time passes. Kings rise and fall. The painting travels with them. Then the French Revolution hits. The monarchy collapses. Royal collections are seized, and in 1797, the Mona Lisa moves to the newly opened Louvre. For the first time, anyone can see it. In 1800, Napoleon visits, falls for it, and has it hung in his personal palace for 4 years before returning it. After that, it settles into the Louvre permanently, admired, studied, but still not a global icon. By 1850, most visitors see it as one impressive Renaissance painting among many. That's about to change. Paris, Monday, August 21, 1911. The Louvre is closed, only maintenance staff and a few guards inside. A man dressed like a cleaner moves through the hallways. His name is Vincenzo Peruggia, 29 years old, Italian, a former Louvre glazier who knows every corner of the building. He walks into the Salon Carré, lifts the Mona Lisa off the wall, carries it to a side staircase, pries the panel from the frame, wraps it in cloth, tucks it under his coat, and walks out. The frame is found on the floor. No alarm, no witness. The world's most famous painting is gone. It takes over 24 hours for anyone to even notice. The police launch a massive investigation, and the names they land on are stunning. They bring in Guillaume Apollinaire, an avant-garde poet who had publicly called for museums to be burned. Then they pull in his close friend, a young Spanish painter named Pablo Picasso. Both are questioned. Both deny everything. Both walk free after a few days. Peruggia doesn't even appear on the suspect list. Nobody imagines a glazier pulled this off. The leads go cold. But here's the twist. The theft does something no one expected. Thousands of people line up at the Louvre just to stare at the empty wall. The Mona Lisa makes front pages across the world. People who had never once thought about a Renaissance portrait now can't stop talking about it. Then, in December 1913, 2.5 years later, an art dealer in Florence receives a strange letter. A man claims to have the Mona Lisa and wants to sell it quietly. The dealer alerts the police, and on December 10th, in a small Florentine hotel room, Peruggia lifts a cloth from a crate beside the bed and reveals the painting. The police storm in. He's arrested on the spot. He says he did it for Italy. He believed it was his duty to return an Italian masterpiece stolen by the French. Italy briefly celebrated him as a hero. France tried him as a criminal. He received a sentence of 1 year and 15 days. Before the painting returned to Paris, Italy put it on a brief tour. Florence, Rome, Milan. Crowds waited hours in line. Then, on January 4th, 1914, it was reinstalled at the Louvre. Same smile, same mystery. But now the whole world knew her name. The theft accomplished what no advertising campaign ever could. It turned the Gioconda into the most famous painting on Earth. All that fame came with a cost. In 1956, someone throws acid at it during an exhibition, hitting the lower portion of the canvas. Months later, a Bolivian man throws a rock, shattering the protective glass and leaving a small chip on Lisa's left elbow. Bulletproof glass is installed permanently. More attacks follow. A man tries to cut it with a knife in the 1960s. A protester throws red paint in Tokyo in 1974. A Russian tourist hurls a teacup in 2009. A visitor throws a cream cake in 2022. and activists launched tomato soup at the glass in October 2024. The painting survives all of it, nearly untouched. In September 1939, with World War II on the verge of beginning, the French government launches a secret operation. Military trucks pull up behind the Louvre, the Mona Lisa is taken down, packed into a crate labeled as a decorative object, and moved out under cover of night. Over the next 5 years, it cycles through the Loire Valley, a medieval monastery, the Château de Chambord, and a regional museum in southern France. Always at night, always under armed escort. When France is liberated in 1945, the convoy finally heads home. The Mona Lisa has survived a world war. In 1962, France insures it for $100 million, over $1 billion today, making it the most valuable object ever insured. In 1963, President Kennedy convinces France to lend it to the United States for a short tour. It crosses the Atlantic aboard the SS France in an armored crate, guarded around the clock. First the National Gallery in Washington, then the Metropolitan Museum in New York. An estimated 1.7 million people wait in line just for a few seconds with it. After that tour, and later visits to Tokyo and Moscow, France draws a permanent line. The Mona Lisa will never travel again. The poplar wood panel it's painted on is deteriorating. It stays in Paris forever. Now here's where it gets strange. The story of the Mona Lisa doesn't revolve around one painting. At the exact moment Leonardo is working on the portrait in Florence, the young artist Raphael sketches what appears to be the same scene. Nearly identical pose, same hands, same composition. But in Raphael's sketch, there are 2 columns behind the figure. Those columns don't exist in the Louvre version. For years, people assumed Raphael invented them. But Raphael was living in Florence at the time, moving in the same circles as Leonardo, living close to the Giocondo family home. What if those columns weren't invented? What if he was drawing what he actually saw, an earlier version? In the early 20th century, a painting emerged that nobody had seen before, now known as the Isleworth Mona Lisa. The model looks younger, the format is larger, and the landscape is simpler. Crucially, it's painted on canvas, not wood, and Leonardo was known to make preparatory versions before committing to a major work. Some researchers believe this is the first Mona Lisa, set aside before Leonardo began the more refined version we know today. That opens up an uncomfortable question. How certain are we that what hangs in Paris is actually the original portrait of Lisa Gherardini? One more detail that doesn't get enough attention. Early descriptions of the painting mention eyebrows and eyelashes. They're gone now, not because Leonardo left them out, but because he painted them so delicately that 5 centuries of aging erased them completely. Vasari wrote about them in 1550. Extraordinarily fine. They were there. They're gone. And behind the figure, the landscape is deliberately incoherent. The left and right sides don't connect. The horizon is misaligned. The water sits at different heights on each side. Leonardo built a background that feels real, but isn't. A blend of places he knew and places he imagined. Maybe we've been looking in the wrong direction, because the real mystery of the Mona Lisa isn't behind her. It's right in front of us. No theft, no scandal, no history required. Just look at it. Leonardo created something nobody had made before. A presence, a light that comes from nowhere. A smile that only exists when you're not looking directly at it. Even if none of the rest had ever happened, no robbery, no world war, no bulletproof glass, the Mona Lisa would still be a masterpiece. A peek in the history of art that, even now, we haven't fully figured out. 10 million people a year stand in front of her. Most of them leave with the same questions they came in with. You don't. If there's a piece of history you think the world is looking at the wrong way, a painting, a discovery, a figure nobody's talking about, tell me in the comments. That's where the next video starts. See you there.